Put the
Start.
All right. Oh, did you hear that?
Hey guys, we've got ourselves a little bit of drink, and that's why we're having this little drink. Oh, you. Well, let's do our proper intro then. It's about time.
All right, here we go.
The people deserve it. And cooks, it's all up to you.
And welcome to the Halfie Project podcast. I am your host, Cedric Skysetti, and right across from me is...
Becky.
Yes, and tonight we have a very interesting topic. But before we get into that, if you don't know what the Halfie Project podcast is, it's basically a podcast where two half Koreans are talking about what it's like to be half Korean. But we also talk a lot about Korean culture and also other different cultural elements. And so, if you're new to these parts, make sure you subscribe.
Wow, you just skipped to the end.
I know. I don't know. I still don't know how to do this. And this is so I'm so used to doing YouTube stuff.
I know, this is very YouTube-y.
I mean, do they subscribe? Do you guys subscribe when you listen to podcasts?
Yeah, you subscribe to a podcast.
Or is it follow?
Oh, speaking of, well, you might as well just bring this up now.
Okay.
If you guys just find even a little bit of space in your heart to do this, head over to iTunes, where they have the podcast, Apple Podcasts, and leave us a review. You can rate us. 5 stars is preferable, and then leave a review, because by doing that, then this is how you're able to promote the Halfie Project. This is the only way that they can check, oh, these guys are actually doing something. So if you have that in your heart to do that, we implore you and would be really grateful.
Yeah, in other words, go do that now.
Yeah,
We'll be right back.
And let's take a break.
Today's topic, we're going to be talking about hip-hop.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about not only just hip-hop in general, but how does it relate to Korean hip-hop?
Yes.
Because hip-hop is huge in Korea.
It's huge worldwide.
Worldwide, yeah. It's actually one of the, if not the most popular genre by just sheer numbers and downloads and listens, it's definitely top 3. Yeah, so
it's a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, it's huge. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. But how is it relevant for us?
Yeah.
I mean, we are... we talk a lot about Korean culture here. We talk about, different elements of culture. And since it's a huge part of culture, and with everything going on in the States now, especially, and even worldwide, we thought this would be a very interesting topic to bring up, because hip hop in and of itself, as a musical genre, if you will, or as a lifestyle, however you look at it, is, in my opinion, a lot different than, say, any other style of music or genre of music. There's nothing like hip-hop. Yeah, so we're going to be getting into it. We're going to be, diving into a little bit of the history.
A little bit of the history, a little bit of the background.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about it, going through the ages and how it came into Korea and what it looks like today.
Yeah, so... it's going to be a fun one. I think it's going to be a long one too, but you're going to want to stick around because it's going to be very interesting.
Buckle up, guys. I'm really excited for this episode. Okay, so yes, it does have to do. I think it was the current situation, the U.S. Black Lives Matter movement. This kind of sparked it in the back of my brain.
Yeah.
But in reality, it actually started when we were having chicken all together with the Halfie Project team, if you remember. And Jay, shout out to Jay, people who have been part of this podcast since the beginning know who Jay is. He was, I think he was saying something about some Korean hip hop artist that we saw on the screen that was playing in the restaurant, right? And I don't know how we got on the topic, but you guys were like, no, hip hop is something totally different. You can't just come in and sing it and pretend you're hip hop, quote unquote.
Right.
And I was, in my naivety, saying come on, this is just music appreciation, right? Mimicry is the highest form of flattery. And it can be argued, I would say, both ways. And so that's why we're kind of wading into this territory with a bit of caution.
Yeah, I guess it could be argued both ways, but I would say, in my opinion, it depends on the context. Because for some, I don't think it could be argued, but we'll get into that.
We'll get into that. But before we start, cooks, I wrote a little rap. I did.
Okay.
I wrote a little rap just to kind of set the mood.
Oh gosh.
So I want you to beatbox for me.
Beatbox?
Yeah.
What kind of beat you
just
want?
give me a beat.
Okay, cool. Here we go.
Welcome to the studio. This is the place. I've got the microphone of clarity, culture, and race. We're talking topics of disparity, serious hilarity. We travel every continent to comment on the content of the cases, the people, the current situations. We rendezvous with those who know the history of their nations. It's messy. There are those who will object, so leave your story, get informed, and listen to the Halfie Project.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
You got bars.
I wrote that today.
Really?
Yeah.
Man.
That was for you guys.
I think that was kind of hip hop.
You liked it?
Yeah, but you know the true sign of a real MC is going off the dome.
I know, and I knew you were going to say that.
Really?
And I was like, in order to pretend that I'm actually doing this off my head, I should memorize it. But
I don't know.
I chickened out.
I think we could tell.
Even regardless. You can tell. Yeah, you can tell. There's no way that I could ever call myself a real MC. But that was my kind of.
That was good. That was good. How was my beatboxing though?
Not bad.
Yeah.
I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how you beatbox, once in a while.
Okay.
I really
Cool.
appreciate that.
I'll do it for you anytime.
Thanks.
All right. So, very nice little introduction
That
there.
is the intro.
But let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about hip hop in Korea. Okay, so before we get into a little bit of the history of hip hop as a whole, let's talk about hip hop in Korea because it's, like we mentioned, it's such a huge phenomena here in Korea.
Yeah.
In not only in its own like Korean hip hop genre, but also in just the pop side in general. So I think every time you have a new group coming out, there's always going to be singers and there's always going to be like someone rapping, right?
I
in
feel
the name
like-
of, I guess, hip hop style.
Right. Like with K-pop, more like this. I don't know exactly when that kind of happened because we had like people who were rapping and being street and hip hop. I'm doing
Yeah.
quotation marks here if you can't see that. But I mean, having like that one rapper part of the K-pop group, I don't know when that started, but now it's so common, right?
Yeah. I mean, it started from the very beginning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it
did
really
it?
did.
Oh, from the very beginning. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should backtrack a bit. How did things start in Korea?
Okay, cool. So in Korea, and I feel somewhat qualified to talk about this because
Okay.
I was in, I guess, the very beginning days when I was living and growing up in the States. I used to listen to Korean music that my mom would help me get
Yeah.
through the Korean markets because they would import the Korean tapes at the time. We had tapes. So, so it basically started with a group called 서태지와 아이들, which means like 서태지 and the boys.
서태지 and the
Yeah,
Boys.
that was their English translation.
Right.
And they were the ones that most people would credit for bringing in not only hip hop, but just K-pop as we know it today, modern day K-pop. Now, before that, Korean music was very, very ballady. A lot of ballads.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were a
We
lot
had
of
some
ballads
like
because
trot, like 트롯 음악.
yeah. So the thing is, there was a lot of ballads.
Yeah.
But the main, I guess, the most popular music style was trot music, and I don't know how to describe it, but I think
either.
the best way to do it is to like demonstrate.
How are you gonna?
I
do
don't
a
know,
little
like
trot right
like
now?
vocally, it's kind of like very wavy and like Okay, that didn't work out the way I pictured it in
What
my
was
head.
that?
I mean, you know what I was trying to do, right?
I know what you're trying to. Okay, there we go. That was better. Yeah. Having a little bit of beat like that. That was
Yeah.
a little better.
Yeah.
Ooh, cooks.
I mean, my mom was. Oh my gosh, I'm sweating.
Oh wow, that was very funny. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, so trot was like a
Good
very
effort, good
popular style.
Yeah, it was really popular. It was kind of like the early folksy pop. We
Yeah.
were coming out of this, like, we had in, I want to say, like the 50s and 60s era, you had a lot of music that was kind of patriotic, right? Or like people who were protesting. The protest songs were really popular. And then this pop influence was coming in, and that was, that's how they were doing it. Like,
Right.
dun 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 dun,
Yeah.
dun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it should be noted that there was a little bit of Western influence from the military coming in.
So much.
Yeah, so after
Yeah.
the Korean War. And to my surprise, actually researching for this show, some of the things that I didn't know was pre like Soteji era. So this is like pre 1992 era.
He debuted in what, 90? 1990? 1992.
Yeah. So like pre that era, there was actually There were a lot of, not a lot, but there were like some artists that would attempt to sing English in their songs,
Yeah.
and there were also some artists that would actually
Do
rap.
a little rap. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who you're talking about?
Who?
홍서범 in his song 김삿갓. It was like an early rap.
Yeah.
And it's funny because he's wearing like a kind of suit.
Like a suit.
Yeah, and then he's just like bobbing his head and rapping to the music.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very Korean. Like there's no flow.
Yeah, very Korean, like no swag.
Yeah.
No swag.
And that was 1989.
And it's as cringy as you could probably imagine. Yeah, but it was cute.
It was a good effort.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice
so
beat.
so obviously they were influenced by the West.
Yes.
Somehow, some way.
Well, actually, let me jump in there. So around Yongsan, we had the Yongsan military base. And in Itaewon area, people wonder now, like, wow, Itaewon is like a hot spot for parties and clubs and that kind of thing. Well, actually, there were some clubs that were specifically for the American GI. And so they would come out to these clubs in Itaewon, and that's where they'd party it up. And of course, to cater to the American GIs, they would play American music. So like Michael Jackson, huge time, right? And so that's how they would enjoy themselves and dance and that kind of thing. Eventually, those clubs started getting opened up to Korean people too, who could start to come. So they were getting exposed to, oh, wow, like this kind of dancing, oh, this kind of music. And this is where actually b-boying became more popular in Korea.
Oh.
They learned those dance moves from some American GIs, right? So you can see this cross influence was happening at that time. I think the perfect example, if we're going to metaphor this, there was a type of car in Korea that was called, it's going to sound like I'm cursing, but I'm not. This was the real name. 시발. Okay, the name was actually that, which means 시 from 시작, 발 from 출발, which means like start, go, start, take off kind of thing. So the car was actually created. They took the best parts of the American Jeep from the military leftover bits. They put it together, tuck, 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 and created a more superior car. And this is kind of what I consider the metaphor to how Korea took hip hop.
Okay.
They took the bits and pieces here and there, and they kind of, I don't know how you want to say it, glamorized it.
Right.
Made it Korean.
Right.
This is how I metaphor hip hop
Yeah, I
in
think
Korea.
I would agree with you, I think. Yeah. Yeah, so it was just very interesting to see the, I guess, pre-1992 era of music. But again, mostly it was trot. But then in 1992, there debuts a band, which is Seotaeji and the Boys.
Yeah.
And they came out actually on this like video or music contest show.
Yeah.
And, so they had to perform in front of a panel of judges. And so it's basically three guys, just very Korean looking guys. Actually, I think they were dressed up in suits.
One was a lady, too. One of the judges was a lady.
Yeah, but I mean like Seotaeji and them, they were all
Seotaeji
dressed
와야 돼.
up. And so I remember they, made the performance. And after the performance, the judges mostly just kind of ripped them. It was like, this is not relevant. This is not.
I think someone said like, your sound is bad. Like just straight up.
Yeah, and you can see the look on their face. They're like, oh, pretty discouraged. But I'm telling you, right after that performance, like I think within a matter of weeks and months, they kept at it, and they actually became very popular super quickly. And so what made them special was they brought in hip hop elements from the States or from the West. And so they not only did like R&B type of, I guess, not beats, but like just like singing and hooks, but they also rapped, right? So Seotaeji was the main vocalist, and then like the Boys, they were mostly backup dancers and backup vocalists.
The dancing is so cute.
Yeah, and sometimes they would sing too, but Seotaeji was the main guy. So he brought in rap, and he was also a producer, very good musician. He actually played in a metal rock band prior to...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He's got that weird metal hard rock
Yeah,
song.
yeah. So he was already like in the zone of like being outside of the box, outside of the norm, outside of the status quo.
Right.
So he brings in just the hip hop sound from the States and begins to, tailor it to, I guess, their own style. So this was the birth of K-pop as we know it.
Well,
he's
he's called the father of K-pop, isn't he? So he's
yeah.
kind of like the sparking of it.
Right. And so I remember being a kid listening to the first album.
난 알아요.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so dope. And what also made this, I guess, very native to what hip hop is the fact that he sampled.
Okay,
He
all right.
used samples,
You brought
just
that
like
up. Yeah.
just like any hip hop artist would do back in the States. He used
Yeah.
samples, and he actually sampled from, just to name a few, he sampled from Public Enemy and Nan
Oh.
Arayo. Yeah, so
Oh.
he sampled Flavor Flav's part in I forgot the name of the song,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, he sampled the yeah boy, because that was
okay.
Flavor Flav,
Okay, uh-huh.
right? And he also sampled from like Heavy D and the Boys.
Mm-hmm.
So different hip hop elements from the States he sampled.
Mm.
So they exploded within that first year of coming
Yeah.
onto the scene.
Well, 서태지. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, and then from there you start to see other groups pop up.
Yeah.
Yeah, other artists who began to rap and began to take on this hip hop style.
You can even see in their first debut, 난 알아요,
Mm-hmm.
they're wearing like this baggy pants. Like they're trying to be street, which you weren't seeing at all on the Korean stages or like the music videos. Like we
No.
just said prior to that, 1989, you know, Hong Seobum, who was quote unquote rapping, he's dressed up in a suit, even though the girls back are like, you know, doing their thing and dancing. You didn't see this, you know, like street look. And 서태지와 아이들, they were not only influential musically, but also aesthetically. Like it brought in a whole new look.
Mm-hmm.
And they were specifically influenced by the hip hop scene
Right.
that was happening in the States.
Right. And just a few more things to note about Soteji is there's another song. I forget the name of the song. It's been so, I'm so rusty with my Soteji, but
Can you sing it?
maybe next time. But they're one of their songs off their first album, or it might have been their second album. I remember the music video. They actually had like some foreigners or Westerners in the video.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they had this black dude, I remember, and they were all dressed in baggy pants like Soteji and the boys. And one of them tended to have dreads in his
Oh
hair
yeah,
too.
you know, I think I saw photos.
Yeah, yeah. So, so they really picked up this style that that is pretty much known to hip hop in the States. But yeah, and fun fact is, one of the members of the group, he started YG Entertainment
Yeah.
a couple of years later. So
Yeah,
that's Yang Hyun-suk.
He has a huge influence on the music scene today.
Exactly. So one of the big three music companies he started, and he got into some heat like in the last few years. But anyways, that company is still doing well, still thriving, and pushing out idol groups, which obviously have a lot of influence from hip hop. So you could see the relationship from everything starting with Soteji in the beginning. Yeah. So that's, I think, the very beginning of not only K-pop but Korean hip hop.
I will have to agree with that. I would say the person who took it and then ran with it was Drunken Tiger. A huge, I guess, like influencing factor was not just what was happening in Korea, but also, like we said, the American GIs, their influences here, and as well Korean Americans. Because if we look at hip hop and rap in the US, if we look at it historically, you can break it down into 4 parts. You have like DJs, MCs. These are like the people who are rapping. And then you had graffiti and you had B-boys. And the MCs and the lyrics, this is really important to hip hop. What are you saying? You are lyrically expressing yourself.
You're saying Soteji wasn't like true MC?
But this is not this is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's something extremely intrinsic to the lyricism of rap music,
Sure.
I would say. And so Korean Americans who could speak both English and Korean would be taking these lyrics, this stylized way of speaking or singing that you're singing in hip hop,
Right.
and it was coming over into Korean music and becoming more mainstream with Drunken Tiger and his wife Yoon Mi-rae, who's actually half Korean, half black, and she is notably noticed, some people say, the greatest rapper in Korea.
Right.
But the thing that I found so distinct about her is that she speaks both English and Korean. So
Right.
she was able to directly take those influences from English lyrics
Right.
in the hip hop scene. So this is why I'm seeing this huge crossover happening.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And that was years after Soteji first
This was-
debuted.
yeah,
So
this
late
was like
90s, early
late
2000s
90s.
is
Yeah.
when they really came on the scene.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, Yoon Mi-rae was, she came out kind of mid to late 90s. She was
Yeah.
part of, what was the group name? Like Uptown something.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I think the group, or she was part of several different groups, but yeah, before she really went solo. But yeah, so you could see like I guess if you look at it from a macro level, you could see just the evolution of hip hop in Korea from Sotaeji and really the bubble gum. Like, it's not really like the lyrics aren't really that meaningful, to be honest, up until you get a little bit closer to the 2000s and beyond.
You know, I looked up that actually, lyrics.
What's that?
So, okay, I know I keep jumping back and forth between like Western hip hop, Korean hip hop, but so something that's notable again about Western hip hop, a lot of people will say like, oh, there's so much cursing and violence in the language, da, 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 da. And we can get more into that later if we want to. But I was curious because when they have English lyrics in Korean hip hop or rap, a lot of times the cursing is only happening in the English portion. So I actually looked up 욕 많은 노래 추천. Songs that have a lot of cursing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see what songs they would provide because if you see even rap music in Korea, the lyrics are hardly ever cursing this and that, you know, F this, F that. But you're going to hear that all the time in English lyrics, right? And so I was like, that's very interesting. That mostly, for example, there was Zico. I think he released a song and it's always like, you can't F with my team, but everything is in English when he's cursing.
Right.
But when in Korean, there's none of that cursing going on.
Oh, we're going to talk about him in a bit.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
we'll get
him
into that.
for sure. Yeah. So just to kind of sum up hip hop in Korea, you know, you go from Sotaeji to where we are now, and hip hop is not only its own genre here, but also it's just within the pop circle. You know, it's quite normal to have an idol girl group that's mostly pop to have like a dedicated rapper, because most of these idol groups, the way they manufacture out, let's use that term, the way they manufacture these groups is every person has their own persona in their role usually. And there's always usually a dedicated rapper. You look at BTS, you look at like the, you know, older generation Super Junior, you look at girls generation. I mean, there's 21 CL from 21. I mean, there's always like a dedicated rapper.
Yeah.
And so hip hop and rap is pretty much a permanent part of what K-pop is.
What we consider K-pop.
Yeah. And so this is very important. Now, what I want to get into is talking about, is it okay? You know, is it okay for Korean music or the Korean culture or the people of the culture to, I guess, imitate or to take the elements of hip hop and to make it their own? So I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to unpack that.
Sure.
But in order to unpack that, we have to go back to the beginning of hip hop itself.
Yes.
Because, you know, I think we would agree that hip hop, like we mentioned earlier, I feel like hip hop is different than any other genre. And there are reasons for that. And I think it's because of how it originated. And we're not going to get into details, but
there's no way.
There's no way.
About
yeah,
everything.
in just a couple of minutes covering it. But, you know, it could be argued the I guess the beginnings or the origins of hip hop. But I think most would agree that it originated in Manhattan, specifically in Bronx.
In the Bronx.
Right. And so, again, there are people that would argue, well, it originated elsewhere prior to maybe the 70s.
Like some people will say that was directly influenced from DJs in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can definitely see the strains here from Jamaica, some parts of Africa coming in and being influenced.
Right.
You're influencing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just important to note that during this time, in the 70s, mid to late 70s, the popular music of the time, in Manhattan especially, whenever people thought of New York, and when I say people, I mean people outside of New York, they would kind of glamorize it, you know, because they thought of Manhattan as, you know, obviously the Big Apple. This is where like all the stars went out to play.
Frank Sinatra singing a song.
Yeah.
Dun, dun,
yeah,
dun,
exactly.
dun,
And
dun.
a big time or a big thing that people used to do was to go clubbing. And disco was a thing at the time.
Disco.
Right. So a lot of the people who would constantly go out and, you know, be a part of like disco would be people who are either celebrities or people who they weren't doing so bad in life, you know, in Manhattan. Let's put it that way. And you had people of all colors, of course. But, you know, there was another element to New York that a lot of people didn't really recognize or realize, and that was what was happening in the Bronx. And so in the Bronx, they weren't doing so well as the rest of Manhattan, let's put it like that, especially in the 70s with a lot of the, violence, the danger, some of the drugs that was starting to happen.
Police brutality.
Yeah, police brutality for sure. And so the way hip hop started, again, it could be argued, was really with house parties.
Yes.
Yeah, with house parties.
I would say house parties.
So you have a DJ there, and you get a group of people from the Bronx together who, may not have a lot of money, may not be doing so well in life, but they can get together and have a good time.
Right. It's kind of a distraction, I'd say.
Right. And, they credit DJ Kool Herc as the person that really started it all.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I just think it's so cool what he did. That blew my mind because, I DJ.
Yeah.
And when I was watching about how using the vinyls for DJing, and when he just had that stroke of inspiration where if I play this beat again and again on the other vinyl, then I can repeat the break. And I was like, even I was thinking that's incredible.
Exactly. I mean, it was sick because these early DJs, really starting with Kool Herc, and then a little later on, you have Grandmaster Flash hopping onto the scene. What they would do is they would begin to manipulate certain styles of music. First of all, they wouldn't really focus on the popular music at the time at these parties. What they would do is they would find records, mostly like funk and like R&B, soul type of records. You have like the James Brown was a big one, right? And they would
bit
find
of Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah, exactly. They would find like parts of the record to be able to spin and to play, and these parts would be called the break because it's the music break where the drums would just kind of like do its thing.
When they're not singing, they like sing, maybe have a little chorus, and they have the break like tick tick tack tick 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 tick, right? Like that. And so they would just play that part over and over and over again.
Right. And so they figured out how to do this on the turntables, and they rarely ever just did it by themselves. They would have maybe a partner in crime there. So, for example, you have Kool Herc. He would have this guy named Coke LaRock.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was his partner, right? And Coke LaRock was known for doing like shout outs at these parties. So he would be on the mic shouting people out, just like saying, oh, I don't know, Becky from Cali,
right.
Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Just kind of making it fun and rhyming.
It's kind of like
that.
giving credit too. Who's the guy playing? And this actually, they traced it back to what I was saying, the DJs in Jamaica. It's like when somebody's playing, someone would come on the mic and they would be like, oh, there's my man, something, DJ, something, right?
Okay.
And so it's kind of like, woo, shouting, hyping it up a bit. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So
that's kind of where it was coming from.
Yeah. So that was sort of really, honestly, kind of the origin of what we know today, because you have a DJ who's playing beats, and then you have a guy who's emceeing.
Yeah.
And he's just starting to rhythmically just play with words on the mic, getting the crowd hype. And that was really the birth of what we know today as rapping.
Eventually transformed into rapping.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It became on the turntables. It actually used to be the DJ and the MC were the same person. But when Kool Herc figured out that you could, repeat. You were just getting too busy on the turntables. No way you could kinda do both, Grandmaster Flash, he really took the art and perfected it. And so they were too busy working the DJ, so they got somebody else to take the mic and do the MCing.
Right. Yeah.
That's how you get the separation.
Yeah. So these house parties that started out in an apartment in the Bronx started to, outgrow itself, and they would start to do parties outside, block parties, and then really just became a big thing in the Bronx, and it started to really spread, throughout Manhattan. And we won't get into details of like how it really spread, but just know that was sort of the origins. And what we want to really stress is with hip hop and with how it started and why it started, it's important to note that it started with a group of people who were in a situation where, they didn't have much. They were in a situation where they were systemically oppressed in many ways. They were in a situation where they were, many of them were constantly harassed or felt like they weren't safe. So it was birthed out of this sort of like oppression.
I would say form of resistance against the authorities. This is kind of how I feel about it.
Right.
I mean, you can stretch it one way or the other. One way is saying like, we just want to have fun.
Yeah.
We just want to forget our hard times. And then, you know, you have people who are just having fun. Then it gets to the other strong side where they're actually publicly decrying authority figures. This is when you're going to have like Public Enemy, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know, it's just important to note that it starts with a group of people who had an idea, who did it together, and it was something that they could call their own. And so this is very important when we're talking about hip hop in Korea, you know, so we're going to tie that in a little bit. But again, we have to know who started it. We have to give credit where credit is due. And I think that's where a lot of people sort of miss it, because they don't really know hip hop as, say, a culture. They just know it as a style of music, you know, many people.
Right. Is there any way that we could briefly just explain to, maybe if we have some K-popers who are listening who might not fully understand or haven't delved into this, how would you just roundly wrap up hip-hop culture?
I don't know if I could really wrap it up, because I think for some it means one thing and for others it's maybe a lot more deeper. But I think hip-hop culture is it's a culture where, again, it started with a group of people, namely African Americans, who had an art form that they could call their own, that they can express not only ways to, I guess, describe their current situation in their life, but also express their freedom and just their way of having fun. And for others, they were able to express, or are able to express, I guess, social issues,
social commentary,
and call out certain injustices, right? Social commentary. And it's a creative way to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a lot of meaning and depth. And, you know, to even go deeper, for some, it's a lifestyle, and it's even like a religion, hip hop.
Yeah.
Right. So, so there is a spectrum there. But ultimately, I think what the foundation is it stems from a group of people who created it and called it their own. And this group of people, they're used to always sort of not having access to things, not having access to the same equalities. You know, they're used to suffering in many ways.
I pulled up this article that was trying to explain like history of hip hop. I learned a lot, by the way, researching this. Like, in a span of 2 weeks? We started about 2 weeks ago. We watched Hip Hop Evolution, the documentary on Netflix, and I was doing all kinds of reading. I just feel like I zoomed so much information in my brain in a short amount of time, and it was really incredible and fascinating.
Yeah.
This one article, it was from Stanford Education website. But I just wanted to pull out a couple of lines that I took from that article that I feel like maybe encapsulates it a bit. But they said, in the Bronx, there were race riots, urban renewals, arson, government neglect, wiped out education and social service programs, and hip-hop became an international symbol of urban despair, which I thought was a really strong statement. But from what we had watched in that documentary, for example, and the things that I had been reading, I don't know if that's such a stretch of the imagination. And another one was talking about Africa Bambaataa, right? He was one of the DJs who created Zulu Nation.
Right.
And it says here that he vowed to use hip hop to draw poor, angry kids out of gangs. And quote, he was stopping bullets with turntables.
Right.
So
he was a gang member who actually did that.
And so how using music to reach out to the disenfranchised youth.
Yeah.
So I think if we look at it from that point of view, suddenly we see, at least I did, doing this research, suddenly I saw the incredible depth and importance of hip-hop.
Right. And yeah, that had to have been mentioned too, because there's so much meaning and purpose in the music and in the lyrics. And the people who represent hip hop, it's their life, it's their reality, it's their truth. And they speak and they rap and they, you know, play music, they dance out of that truth and that reality. And I think you can sum it up with one word: authentic. It's authenticity for them.
Isn't there another phrase that people are always throwing around? Keeping it real.
Keeping
you
it
know
real?
when
Yeah,
they
yeah,
say
yeah,
like,
keeping
oh,
it
I'm just
real.
keeping it real, right? With your lyrics. You gotta keep it real.
Right. And so, I mean, you can go throughout the decades of hip hop music and really see the different, I guess, evolutions of hip hop, you know, from the, you know, mid to late 80s where, you know, the introduction of gangster rap and really talking a lot about, again, the social injustices.
Influence of the Black Panthers.
Right. So you have NWA, you have Public Enemy, who are very political in their raps. And
Tupac was coming in.
Oh, yeah, Tupac.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you just go through all of that and you could just see the incredible depth. And again, like you mentioned, just the lyrics and the messages behind it. And so when you think about that and you think about hip hop in that light with everything that we mentioned, and then you compare that to what's going on in Korea. And we're talking about Korea because mainly we're living in Korea and we're half Korean.
But also Korean K-pop and Korean rap is sweeping the nation.
Yeah,
it's sweeping the world.
Yeah.
This is why I think it should be discussed.
Right. So, you know, now with everything that's said, you know, I want to talk about this idea of cultural appropriation.
All right, we're stepping into some sticky ground.
I mean, no, you know, ultimately it's...
what do you think it is?
What?
Cultural appropriation.
I think it is the taking, or if I could put it politely, the borrowing of maybe an element or something in this context of someone else's culture and taking that maybe without giving respect or even credit to the original culture, and taking it even a step further, capitalizing on that, monetizing it, making money off of that. I mean, there's different ways that you could spin it, but I think it's really just taking from another culture or another person without respects to the origin or giving it credit. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that. I think cultural appropriation, because the act of mimicking or being inspired by another culture or another person, another music genre, as you can see, hip hop is sampling from, you know, disco, R&B. You could argue, hey, they're a totally different culture and genre. You guys are stealing. That's musical appropriation. You could argue that, right? But I think it's mostly about power. I think it's when the person who is appropriating is taking it from the oppressed and using something the oppressed use as their own voice. You are taking that and then being awarded for it culturally, artistically, monetarily. People saying, oh, wow, what a great job. Look at you, the white man who's rapping.
Right.
But is he showing respect where it's due, and where did he take that from?
Right.
I fear this is what we see in not just Korea, but a lot of Asian hip hop artists.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, there are, again, you always have a spectrum of opinion. Like Black culture, or I shouldn't even say Black culture because there isn't one Black culture, but you know, Black people, when it comes to like hip hop, they're not a monolith. It's not just one way to view it. There's a spectrum. You have some people that'll look at Korean hip hop or rappers in Korea and be like, oh snap, that's sick, that's tight, it's cool that they, you know, got inspired off of hip hop and they're making it their own. And you have others that are like, these are posers, these are fakes, you know. And then you have some people in between, which I tend to fall kind of in between.
You're kind of in between. Okay.
Just it depends on the context and who it is, right?
Yeah. It's like, is it your lack of sensitivity towards other culture, or are you emulating your heroes?
Right.
You know.
Right. And so, I mean, this can get really philosophical, and I don't think I have an answer really, but I have a lot of things to really just consider when it comes to people who are in, I guess, Korean culture, who are into hip hop. A lot of things to consider. Okay. So, you know, when I look at artists, let's take modern day artists, you know, because Korean hip hop and Korean music has, in terms of quality, in terms of creativity, I mean, it's almost second to none. You know, the production is really good. As a matter of fact, a lot of the producers, sometimes they're from the United States. So, you know, collab with producers in the States. I mean, Girls' Generation, like 10 years ago, did a collab with Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg was on the
Really?
Yeah. Bring the boys out, the remix funny. Or whatever. So, but when I look at certain artists that dress a certain way, that might be having a bandana on and just kind of like, you could tell that they're really acting like they're from the street, but they were born and raised in Korea.
Which is not to say you can't have hardships and growing up on the street in Korea.
No,
by
not
any
at
means.
all. Not at all. But it's, here's the thing. I don't know any hood areas in Korea.
Well,
When
not,
I say
not
hood,
now.
when I say hood, well, we're talking in this context, right? Like with artists today. When I say hood, like, people have grown up and they still grow up and they still live in, the hood. In other words, like places where they may not have access to resources or, whether it be systemic racism or, as a product of that. I mean, just these areas that I know that don't exist in Korea, let's just say. But they try to portray like they're from these areas in the States.
Yeah.
I have an issue with that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, you're not being authentic.
It's like, again, Jay had said this that really stuck in my head. He said, I don't mind if you want to wear that kind of clothes. I don't mind if you want to sing that kind of music, but don't come up on a TV show acting like you're so hard. And then when the producer says something to you, you're just like, oh, 네 선배님, yeah. Right? Your attitude suddenly becomes so like, oh, yes, polite and servile.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it doesn't match, in my opinion. So I agree with that. So, yeah, on one hand, I do understand, and I do think that a lot of artists do appreciate and they do look up to the certain culture, but I think the way they look at it is they look at like hip hop as a style only. They look at it as fashion. They don't know anything about the origin. They don't know anything about the message or the meaning behind a lot of the people representing hip hop.
Yeah.
But they just look at it as just a fashion. I can somewhat excuse that, I guess.
I feel like I'm physically watching you dance around the mines.
No. I mean, I'm just trying to consider all sides, honestly. I'm trying to be empathetic here. But I mean, I'll blast someone who needs to be blasted. Okay. Like, I'm about to blast. As a matter of fact, because you brought up Zico,
okay.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So he's a Korean, I guess, rapper.
Yes.
Who tries to portray a super thug. Like, when I say thug, I mean like he tries in his mind to be a thug or a hoodlum.
He even released some diss tracks.
Let's not even get into that.
Really?
So he has a song where
you look mad.
He has a song where he's wearing like bandana. All right, the music video is called Tough Cookie. You guys can look it up if you want, right? He's wearing his bandana. I mean, he's got like different scenes and stuff like that where he's wearing different outfits, but he's like flicking the camera off. He's like swearing like crazy in English, right? And he's trying to look hard. I mean, the title of the song is Tough Cookie, like he's bad, he's tough, he's skinny dude. He's all tatted up and stuff like that. And the funny thing is, he is literally, I guess, imitating or taking on what the black culture has given him. But the irony is, in one of the scenes, and this is where I had a problem, he was wearing a jacket and they had a Confederate flag on the jacket.
Oh, it's ironic.
It's very ironic.
Do you think he knew when he was wearing that?
Probably not, to be honest.
Oh, I guess just
probably
a fashion
not.
statement.
But that goes to show that before you dip your toes in this territory, there needs to be education. And that, I think, again, I can give him maybe a pass, even though I think he needs to sit down, because it's like, dude, you're not being authentic. You didn't grow up like that here in Korea. He needs to sit down, because like, I want to put him in the setting that he's trying to emulate. He wouldn't last a second. So things like that I have a problem with. And he doesn't even know probably the extent of why I have a problem with it. But, he's not the only one. And it goes to really just being educated. And so I think it's more of even a systemic issue here in Korea. And what I mean by that is, or I should say, I don't know if systemic is the right word, maybe systematic, a product of the systems that's set up in the entertainment industry here.
Right.
There's no education. There's no cultural awareness when it comes to these things.
A lot of these rappers in the K-pop idol groups, they're not musicians.
Right.
They are industrialized notions.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Right.
That's what it is.
I mean, they don't, many of them, they probably don't even really come up with their own persona. It's kind of given to them. They have stylists. They have. So I think it's more of an issue of the system that is set up here. And I think honestly, at this point, there needs to be some sort of change.
Well, the thing
with
is,
that.
I think it's too late for that. I think it's too late for change. I don't think it's too late for education. It's never too late. It's never too late to change your mindset about the kind of music you're making.
Yeah.
However, I think that K-pop, hip-hop, in which actually in Korea they separate it. When you look up hip-hop, you have 국내 hip-hop, which is like country hip-hop, like our country
Yeah.
hip-hop, and then 외국 hip-hop, which means foreign hip-hop. Even when you look in the search engines, you can tell the difference, what they recognize, what is 국내 hip-hop and 외국 hip-hop. And I think that now it's just been here so long, taken through so many hands, so many transformations, polished really well, and given its own Korean flair, that it is something different.
Right.
I mean, it's under the umbrella. I do think in some sense it was appropriated, but now it's kind of transformed into something else.
Yeah, I could see that. I can see that. It just has a style.
Yeah.
And even as a fashion, you know, and
Right.
so that's the other side that I can see. And again, I don't have a hard stance one way or the other. I just kind of judge it by the context. But like Zico, he can sit down. You know, I will say that he can sit his tail down.
Ooh, any
But,
Zico fans here?
Yeah, but again, I understand why he's the way he is.
Yeah.
You know, and
Because
I
the
can't.
thing is, he's also a product of this culture.
Exactly. And so, you know, I can have a little bit of patience, or probably understanding is a better word.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's I don't think it's right.
So something I'm hoping will happen with Black Lives Matter. We have been talking about all of these things like cultural appropriation, you know, depending on how you look at it. Here in Korea, you know, hip hop artists almost like mimicking, emulating certain styles or what they consider to be quote unquote black culture, hip hop culture, and pretending it's the real them when it's not authentic. And up to now, maybe it's been okay, let it slide, right? Like, oh, you took it for your own. But with the Black Lives Matter movement, these ideals or these things that original hip-hoppers, original rappers were saying and singing about and writing about is now, it's still relevant today.
Right.
And we're seeing that with the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, it's crazy. I was listening to Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five and their song The Message. You watch that music video and you listen to the lyrics, and I was thinking, this feels so relevant to what's happening to so many people today. What happened? How come 30 years later, why wasn't there any change?
Yeah, 40 years later.
40 years later.
Almost half a
How
century.
come it's still like a rallying song to what we're witnessing happening right now with the Black Lives Matter movement? And I find it a suspicious silence in the Korean rappers, hip hop community. Sure, you've got like BTS donating $1 million, you know, to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
That's nice. That's
Yeah.
great.
I wonder who actually decided.
I
to
wonder
do
who
that.
actually decided that too. You know, I wonder what executive said, this will look good for your image, right? Are they capitalizing on a real social issue that's happening right now? And then, you know, you also have simultaneously other people, other artists here in Korea who try to speak up about Black Lives Matter and getting their Instagrams canceled, you know, by their agencies. It says a whole lot about how much Korea loves Black culture, how much they love hip hop, how much they love all of these things that came out of a time of unrest in cities like New York City or on the West Coast or in the South. And yet, still today, they can't love the people who created all of that. And I hope with the Black Lives Matter, will that, I don't know, shed more spotlight on that hypocrisy? That's, you know, it's not a question of yes or no. It's just something I hope for.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, without let's put it like this: without Black culture, and again, disclaimer, there isn't one Black culture, but I hope you guys can catch the heart of what I'm saying. Without Black culture, there wouldn't be in my opinion, Korean pop culture or Korean
as we know
hip-hop
it today.
culture, as we know it today. I mean, maybe it would have developed in some other way. Who
Eventually,
knows?
yeah, maybe.
You know, but yeah, but especially as we see it in modern times, in the recent past decade, the way that hip hop here has developed and the way artists have developed into like their own hip hop personalities, there would be none of that without my people. You know what I mean? And without them really being the trendsetters and the originators. And with that being said, I think right now, not only the United States, but the world is having to face, I guess, the reality of dealing with a situation that Black people have had to face for hundreds of years, really. And not only in America, but here in Korea, all across the world, in confronting their own maybe stereotypes or confronting what they've always thought to be Black people, and really seeing if they're going to rise up and come to the defense of Black people. And when I say defense, I don't mean like just defending them, but really standing up for equality, standing up for what they know is right when it comes to the human rights issue.
And I know we come on really strong in some points here. And this is not to say that like, oh, if you love K-pop, then you don't understand real hip hop. This is not by any means what we're saying.
Yeah.
And we know for a fact, we've seen in the news, like some K-poppers, you guys have really used your influence online to, did you see what they did? They
White Out
stole,
Wednesday?
like it was like All Lives Matter, you know, that hashtag that was also trending instead of Black Lives Matter. K-poppers apparently like, I don't know who started it. They started hashtagging All Lives Matter, but just on like memes and ridiculous things. I think that's so funny.
They stole the hashtag White Out Wednesday, which was like supposed to be in opposition of Blackout Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
And it was all K-pop memes.
That's so funny.
I was so confused that whole day, actually.
Yeah.
I was like, is this a joke? Is this like offensive?
It is a joke.
I don't know if I should be offended, but I get what they were doing. I didn't know until the day after.
I love that.
I mean, that's awesome. Like, I think the K-pop community...
You guys have power.
Like, some of them are the most passionate.
Yeah,
like,
super
some of y'all are
passionate.
crazy. But, like, also, you guys are very, like, you guys band together and stand for what you feel is right, and I respect that. So it's a very strong community, and, I mean, they're in the millions and millions at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but coming back to the issue of, I guess, Black Lives Matter, yeah, this would be a trying time to see specifically if the people who are profiting and taking, or let's just say borrowing or imitating from Black culture or hip hop culture, if they're going to rise up and actually say something, come to the defense of, or really just stand for, again, Black lives.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get, I guess, the issues of, you know, if you're with an agency or whatever, you got to like be politically correct or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think we'll see who's going to really be able to, I guess, stand up for what's right, especially in the hip hop community.
This is not a political issue or an economical issue. This is a human issue. And if there's anything that equalizes all of us, it's just our sheer humanity. Nobody is going to, you know, live eternity on this planet. We are all going to die someday, right? And I think when you face that reality that we are all mortal beings here on this planet together, once you've really hit that foundational truth about us as humans, then there's no way you can place one above the other.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter how fancy you are, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how many albums you've sold. You have to recognize the humanity in every person, and especially if you have been inspired by certain people or there's certain cultures that you really love, or you feel like, wow, this really speaks to me. I think more than ever, you should want to protect the people who have created that.
Very well put. I mean, you put it better than I did, honestly.
I just felt like it welled up inside of me.
No, I mean, that's a very good point. I don't want to come across like I'm against Korean hip hop, because I'm not.
In fact, you love Korean hip hop.
I do, honestly.
Who can lie here?
Right. I mean, again, there's certain people I'm like, you need to sit down.
Yeah.
and reevaluate yourself. But for the most part, I understand it. I get it. And I think some of the Korean hip hop music, like it's really good.
You can't lie. They've definitely taken it and put it a twist.
Yeah. They did make it like their own. In the Korean hip hop culture, or even in the K-pop culture, because there are hip hop elements all throughout K-pop, I would like to see a progression of cultural awareness when it comes to hip hop culture. And understanding the origins of where it came from and what the subject matters are, or what the message of hip hop is. You know what I mean? Or the different messages, I should say. Most people in hip hop are willing to share the culture of hip hop with others that may not be like themselves. Okay, so I feel like if there is a level of respect and honor from the person who is quote unquote outside of the hip hop circle, or someone who is not part of the originating like crew or descendants of the originators, so to speak, I feel like as long as there's respect and they pay homage to, I think there isn't an issue with taking part in the culture from the outside. I think it's a beautiful thing when hip hop can share the culture with others, and others can take it and even make it their own or express themselves in a certain way. I think that's great, and I think it's beautiful. But I think that whoever is taking or borrowing or imitating hip hop, or just immersing themselves in hip hop, they need to pay respects to where hip hop came from, and they need to understand that. So I think that's what I would like to see.
And we know it can be done. We saw it with Eminem, didn't we?
That's true. That's true. So I think most people would consider him to be a very top level MC in the hip hop culture. With that said, we have some listener mail, and I think it's going to be a very valuable one today.
So this was an email that came in from a guy named Rick Allen, and he titled it "Protests Through the Eyes of a Black Korean." And this is what he said. This is what Rick wrote in. I've been filled with an array of feelings over the past weeks. Most of the racism I've knowingly experienced in my life has been centered on my black half, so it doesn't take much for me to identify with the victims of racism. Since the protests began, I felt an unexpected gratitude for protesters. There have been protests in the recent past for the unjustified deaths of black people, but this moment feels different. The manner in which allies have taken a stand for us has surprised me. It doesn't feel like it's just talk anymore. People are putting their health at risk in the streets, giving their money in an uncertain economic time, and encouraging others to do the same to a degree that I previously thought was impossible. I'm so thankful that people of all walks of life care so much and are motivated to help. It has made me believe that people who are prejudiced might start to see the light. It's hard to be overseas at a time in which I want my voice to be heard. I want to be there alongside my family, friends, and allies, but instead I'm reading what happened overnight when I wake up in the morning. I'm assuming Rick is here in Korea. It hasn't been easy to feel so disconnected, but these are the cards I've been dealt. Sure, it's safer to be here, both away from protests and not interacting with police in America, but this is one time when I feel like I should be home. On a daily basis, I want to scream in anger, cry from sadness, and hug the people fighting for us. I'd like to think the playing field is starting to tilt, but the fight is obviously still far from over. He didn't even sign his name. He just left it there. Rick, thank you so much for sharing that very honest insight to how you're feeling during this time. I can't even imagine. This must just scratch the surface of just what is inside you, but thank you for trying to explain it to people who might not feel the way that you feel. And I would say, I guess safely speaking for both of us, we both are on the same page. Yeah. And I feel you, man. I feel the same way being over here, and I feel I tend to feel a little more helpless. You know, I feel like I'm not there on the front lines, but I think we just have to do what we can from where we are and use our voice, our influence in any way that we can. Yeah. Well, thanks for writing in, Rick. That was a great email. And for anyone else who wants to write into us, you can always get in touch at thehalfieproject@gmail.com. Do you want to wrap up, or you want me to wrap up? Okay, I'll do it. Thank you guys for tuning in this episode. Let us know what you thought. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave comments below the video. If you're listening via podcast, you can always send us a message via Instagram at The Halfie Project or an email at thehalfieproject@gmail.com. And get in touch. We want to hear your story. Subscribe anywhere you listen to this podcast. Goodbye, Cedric. I'll see you after this episode
in
ends.
a few minutes.
I'll see you right after this. And thanks for listening. We are The Halfie Project.